The air on the Hollywood set hummed with a unique kind of electricity. It wasn't just the bright lights or the whirring cameras. It was the presence of a legend. 10-year-old Kurt Russell felt it deep in his bones, a buzzing excitement that made his fingers tingle and his heart beat a little faster than usual. This was his first big movie, and he was surrounded by magic. He'd arrived that morning with his dad, Bing Russell, a seasoned character actor who knew the rope. Bing had told him to keep his eyes open, listen, and most importantly, be polite. Kurt was already doing 2 out of 3. His eyes were wide open, soaking in every detail of the soundstage, the massive flats, painted to look like a diner, the tangle of cables on the floor, the busy crew members moving with a purpose he didn't quite understand yet. Listening was a bit harder when his mind was racing. "Okay, Kurt, this is it," Bing had whispered, guiding him past a giant spotlight that smelled faintly of ozone. "Just remember what we talked about. This is a job, but it's also a chance to learn." Kurt nodded, his throat suddenly a little dry. He was playing a small part, a quick scene with the star. The star, just thinking the name made his stomach flip. Elvis Presley, the king. Kurt had seen him in the movie magazines his mom read, heard his songs on the radio. He was bigger than life, a myth made real, and today Kurt was going to be in a movie with him. The set was a whirlwind of activity. People shouted instructions. Lights were adjusted, and the aroma of stale coffee and sawdust hung in the air. Kurt watched a prop master carefully arrange a stack of records on a shelf, then adjust a napkin dispenser on a counter. Every detail mattered. He felt small, but also incredibly important. A tiny cog in a massive machine. He found a quiet spot near a stack of wooden crates and just observed. He saw the director, a serious man with a perpetually furrowed brow, talking animatedly with a cameraman. He saw the makeup artist dabbing powder on an actress's nose. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Kurt just felt like a kid in a candy store, overwhelmed and delighted. A few minutes later, a production assistant, a young woman with a clipboard and a harried expression, walked over. "Kurt Russell?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. "That's me," Kurt squeaked, trying to sound older than he was. "Great. We're going to do a quick blocking rehearsal, just you and Mr. Presley. He's in his trailer now. But he'll be out in a minute." She smiled, excited. Kurt nodded vigorously, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Good. Just follow me." She led him to the center of the set near the diner counter. It was a simple scene. Kurt's character, a mischievous kid, was supposed to run into the diner, bump into Elvis's character, say a line, and then dash off. Simple. Yes, but the bumping into part made Kurt a little nervous. He didn't want to actually hurt the king. "Okay, so you'll come in from over here." The assistant pointed to an imaginary door. "Run to the counter and Mr. Presley will be standing right about here. You'll kind of grace him as you go past." She demonstrated with her hand, a light touch. "Then you'll say your line, 'Hey, mister, watch where you're going,' and run out that way." She pointed to another exit. Kurt tried to memorize the path, pacing it out a few times. He imagined Elvis standing there tall and famous. What if he messed up? His dad's words echoed in his head. "Be professional, Kurt." Suddenly, the buzz on the set intensified. A ripple went through the crew, a hush mixed with a renewed burst of low chatter. Heads turned. Kurt instinctively looked toward the entrance of a trailer that had been parked just off the set. And there he was, Elvis Presley. He wasn't wearing his iconic flashy stage outfits. He was dressed in a simple button-down shirt, dark trousers, and worn leather shoes, looking like any other guy, yet radiating an undeniable aura. He was taller than Kurt expected, with a natural swagger that made every step seem effortless. His hair was perfectly coiffed. A dark wave swept back, and his smile, even from a distance, seemed to light up the room. He greeted a few crew members with a warm handshake, exchanging a laugh with one of the prop guys. He seemed relaxed, approachable, not at all like the larger-than-life figure from the magazines. but the magnetism was still there. A quiet power that drew every eye. Kurt felt rooted to the spot, completely mesmerized. This was real. He was really here on a movie set, about to share a scene with Elvis Presley. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a drum solo. He forgot his lines, forgot his blocking, forgot everything except the fact that Elvis was walking closer, his gaze sweeping the set, and then those famous blue eyes landed on Kurt. Elvis paused, tilted his head slightly, and a genuine friendly smile spread across his face. He started walking towards Kurt, his easy stride covering the distance quickly. "Well, hello there, partner," Elvis said, his voice a low rumble just as smooth and melodic as his singing voice. He extended a hand. "You must be Kurt." On Elvis, Kurt felt a warmth spread through him. This was happening. He gulped, his hand barely reaching Elvis's. Elvis's grip was firm but gentle. Hi, Mr. Presley," Kurt stammered, feeling his cheeks flush. Elvis chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound. "Just Elvis, son. No need for Mr. Presley. We're just two actors here trying to make a good picture." Kurt looked up at him, a wide-eyed grin replacing his earlier nervousness. Elvis Presley was talking to him, calling him partner, treating him like an equal. This was going to be the best day ever. He just had to remember not to trip over his own feet or worse, mess up his one important line. Elvis's easygoing nature immediately put Kurt at ease. At least a little. The overwhelming nervousness that had tied his stomach in knots began to unravel, replaced by a deep sense of awe. Elvis Presley. The legend was not just famous, he was genuinely kind. "So, you're the young man who's going to be kicking me, huh?" Elvis said with a playful wink, making a slight bowing gesture. Kurt's eyes went wide. "Oh no, sir, I mean no. Just a little bump," they said, "not a real kick." He felt a blush creep up his neck. The thought of actually kicking Elvis was horrifying. Elvis laughed, a full worn sound that filled the space around them. "Don't you worry, son. It's all part of the show. Just make it look good. We'll be fine." He patted Kurt gently on the shoulder, a comforting gesture that instantly calmed the boy's racing heart. The director, a man named Mr. Miller, approached them, clipboard in hand. "All right, Elvis, Kurt, let's run through this. We want to see the path, the timing, nothing fancy yet." "You got it, Miller," Elvis said, turning his attention to the director with professional ease. Kurt watched them, absorbing every interaction. Elvis wasn't just friendly. He was professional. He listened intently, nodded, and asked smart questions about the scene's flow. It was like watching a master craftsman at work. Kurt had always thought of acting as just pretending, but here he saw the discipline, the focus required. "Okay, Kurt, you're coming in from the door," Mr. Miller instructed, pointing. "And Elvis, you're standing right here by the counter, maybe reaching for a cup of coffee." They took their marks. Kurt stood at the imaginary doorway, feeling his heart thump. Elvis stood casually by the counter, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed, but Kurt could sense the alertness beneath the calm. He was ready. "All right, Kurt, whenever you're ready, nice and energetic," Mr. Miller called out. Kurt took a deep breath. Trying to channel the mischievous energy of his character, he burst forward, running towards the counter. As he approached Elvis, he aimed for the gentle graze the production assistant had shown him. He swerved slightly, brushing past Elvis's leg. "Hey, mister, watch where you're going." Kurt blurted out his line, trying to sound defiant, then continued running towards the other exit, just as instructed. He stopped and turned, waiting for direction. Elvis chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Pretty good, Kurt. Nice speed. Felt a little more like a trip than a bump, but we can work with that." Kurt's face burned. He had tripped a little, his foot getting tangled for a split second. He was so focused on not actually hurting Elvis that he'd lost his balance. "Sorry, Mr. Presley, I mean Elvis." "No worries, son," Elvis said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's a rehearsal. That's what they're for. To figure out the kinks." He walked over to Kurt. "Tell you what, maybe instead of running straight, you angle a little, like you're rushing to get somewhere, and you just don't see me until the last second. That way the bump feels more natural, less like you're trying to dodge a bullet." He winked. Kurt nodded, taking in the advice. It made sense. Elvis wasn't just acting. He was thinking about the scene, making it better. "Good idea, Elvis," Mr. Miller chimed in. "Let's try that, Kurt. Try to make it feel more like an accidental collision. You're in a hurry." They went for another take. Kurt focused. He imagined he was late for something important, racing against time. He burst in, his eyes fixed on the other side of the diner, as if his destination was over there. He felt the familiar pull of nervous energy. He ran faster this time, and as he neared Elvis, he slightly misjudged his angle, his leg swinging out a little more than intended. He felt a soft thud as his foot connected with something. He stumbled, caught himself, and quickly delivered his line. "Hey, mister, watch where you're going." He darted off camera, his heart pounding. Had he done it right? Had he hit him too hard? He hadn't meant to. He turned to look back at Elvis, expecting to see Mr. Miller giving instructions, or for Elvis to be talking to the crew. But Elvis was standing still, not moving. He'd actually kicked Elvis Presley, the king. What was going to happen? Would he be fired? Would Elvis be mad? Would he ever work in Hollywood again? The set, which had been buzzing with activity moments before, seemed to fall silent. Kurt could almost hear his own heart pounding in the sudden quiet. He scanned the faces of the crew, but they were all looking at Elvis, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Miller stood frozen, his clipboard halfway to his chest. Kurt looked back at Elvis, who was still looking at him. Elvis's expression was unreadable. Was he angry? Was he in pain? Kurt's mind raced through all the worst-case scenarios. He imagined Elvis yelling, stomping off the set, demanding that Kurt be sent home. He was a goner. His big break was over before it had even truly begun. He felt a tear prickle at the corner of his eye. This was a nightmare. Then, slowly, a faint smile began to form on Elvis's face. It started small at the corners of his mouth, and then spread, lighting up his eyes. He let out a low chuckle, a sound that Kurt had started to recognize as warm and genuine. Elvis lifted his hand and rubbed his leg where Kurt had made contact. He shook his head slowly, still smiling. "Well, I guess we know who's got the fastest feet on this set, don't we?" he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet. He winked again, and a pretty good aim, too, for a little fella. Kurt stared, completely bewildered. He was expecting a lecture, a scolding, anything but this. Elvis wasn't mad. The set for It Happened at the World's Fair was designed to evoke the bustling, optimistic spirit of the 1962 Seattle World's Fair. Today they were shooting a scene inside a fictional diner, one of those classic American eateries with red pinewood booths, a long gleaming counter, and spinning stools. The air was thick with the scent of prop coffee and a faint sweet smell from the fake pastries piled high under glass domes. Kurt Russell was cast as a young boy named Rusty, a street-smart kid who gets mixed up in some of the goings-on at the fair. Elvis, playing the role of Mike Edwards, a bush pilot down on his luck, was the hero of the story. The scene they were rehearsing was a simple one, designed to introduce Rusty and show his cheeky personality. Rusty was supposed to be running through the diner, clearly in a hurry, perhaps trying to escape someone. And, in his haste, he would bump into Mike. Mr. Miller, the director, was a stickler for details. "We need this collision to feel accidental, folks," he'd explained earlier. "Rusty isn't trying to hurt Mike, but he's so focused on whatever he's running from or to that he just doesn't see Mike until it's too late. It needs to be quick, a flash of energy, then the line, and he's gone." Kurt had practiced his entrance countless times in his head. He was supposed to burst through a swinging kitchen door, dash past the counter, deliver his line and exit through the main diner doors. The exact point of contact with Elvis was crucial. It couldn't be too hard, couldn't look fake. It had to be just right. The production assistant had marked Elvis's standing spot with a small piece of tape on the floor, and another for Kurt's path. "Aim for a brush here," she'd instructed, pointing to Elvis's lower leg area. "Just a light graze. We don't want anyone taking a tumble." Kurt had felt the pressure. This wasn't just about saying lines. It was about physical comedy, about timing. And he was working with Elvis Presley. King was famous for his moves, his energy, his stage presence. Kurt wanted to show he could keep up. Before the rehearsal, Elvis had been incredibly relaxed. He'd spent a few minutes chatting with the prop master about vintage records, then moved to the makeup chair where a stylist touched up his iconic hair. He even hummed a little tune, a bluesy melody that Kurt didn't recognize, but found instantly catchy. When he finally walked onto the set, he had this calm, commanding presence. He wasn't acting like a superstar, but everyone knew he was. He was just Elvis. He seemed to genuinely enjoy the movie-making process, asking crew members about their jobs, cracking jokes. He seemed to be one of those people who just made others feel at ease, even if they were meeting him for the first time. Kurt had watched him from a distance, trying to commit every detail to memory. He saw Elvis practicing a few lines under his breath, not his own, but a melody. He saw him lean against the counter, surveying the set with a look of casual interest. He saw the way. His eyes, a piercing blue, seemed to notice everything. The director had called for a blocking rehearsal, meaning they would walk through the movements without full cameras rolling. It was a chance to work out the choreography of the scene. "All right, Kurt, remember full speed but controlled," Mr. Miller had emphasized. "You're a whirlwind, and Elvis, you're just reacting to this little firecracker running into you." Elvis had given a thumbs up. "Got it, Miller. I'll make sure to look surprised." He'd flashed his famous smile. Kurt had taken his position behind the kitchen door, his small heart thudding like a drum. He took a deep breath, picturing the scene in his mind: burst through the door, run, make contact, say the line, bolt. Simple. But the make contact part was the tricky bit. He wanted to be convincing without actually hurt. And action. Kurt burst through the door, his little legs churning. He focused on the far exit, trying to give the impression of being in a desperate hurry. As he neared Elvis, who was casually leaning against the counter, sipping an imaginary coffee, Kurt tried to angle himself just right. He aimed for a glancing blow to Elvis's lower leg, enough to register as a bump, but not a full-on kick. He felt a soft thwack as his foot connected. It wasn't hard, but it was definitely more than a graze. He stumbled slightly, regained his balance, and yelled his line, "Hey, mister, watch where you're going!" Then darted away, just as rehearsed. He stopped just off camera, his chest heaving, a mix of exhilaration and worry bubbling inside him. Had he done it right? He definitely made contact. Maybe a little too much contact. He held his breath, waiting for the director's feedback. He turned to look back at the set. Elvis was still standing there, unmoving. He hadn't flinched, hadn't cried out. Then, slowly, Elvis lowered the imaginary coffee cup from his lips and looked down at his leg. Kurt's stomach plummeted. He knew that look. It was the "something just happened to my leg" look. Oh no. Elvis then slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting Kurt's across the set. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Kurt could feel the eyes of the crew on him. On Elvis, he felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He'd done it, he'd gone and kicked the king. He braced himself for the scolding, the embarrassment, the end of his burgeoning acting career. His mind raced, replaying the moment. His foot had swung out. It wasn't a push, it was a kick. A soft one, but still a kick. He just hoped it hadn't hurt. Then a slow, gentle smile started to spread across Elvis's face. It wasn't a forced smile. It was real. A little mischievous, a little knowing. He reached down and rubbed his shin lightly, then looked back at Kurt, a playful glint in his famous blue eyes. "Well now," Elvis drawled, his voice a low, amused rumble that cut through the silence. "I think that little fella means business. He ain't just running, he's taking names and kicking shins." A few chuckles rippled through the crew. Kurt, still trembling, stared, completely confused. The atmosphere on set shifted from tense silence to an amused murmur. Elvis's light-hearted reaction had diffused the moment like a burst of sunshine. Kurt, however, was still rooted to the spot, a bundle of nerves and lingering embarrassment. He watched as Elvis gave his shin another gentle rub, a tiny smirk playing on his lips. "You got a strong kick there, partner," Elvis said directly to Kurt, his voice still holding that playful tone. "Might need to invest in some shin guards if we're doing many more takes of that." Kurt felt his face burn even hotter. "I'm really, really sorry, Elvis. I didn't mean to. I went a little too fast, I guess." He was mortified. He tried so hard to be careful, to be professional, and he'd still messed up. Elvis walked over to him, his easy stride covering the distance quickly. He knelt down so he was eye level with Kurt, a genuine smile on his face. "Hey, don't you worry about it for a second. It happens. We're moving fast. Things get a little lively." He paused, his eyes twinkling. "Besides, you look pretty convincing. That's what we want, right?" Kurt managed a weak nod. He couldn't quite believe how understanding Elvis was. He'd imagined the king would be upset, annoyed, maybe even a little angry, but there was no hint of that in his voice or his eyes. Only warmth and a strange sort of amusement. Mr. Miller, the director, finally broke his silence. He cleared his throat, a hint of a smile on his own face. "All right. Well, point taken, Kurt. Maybe a little less literal interpretation of the bump next time." He looked at Elvis. "You okay there, Elvis?" "Fit as a fiddle, Miller," Elvis said, standing up with a graceful movement. "Just got a little extra spring in my step now." He winked at Kurt again. Crew began to resume their positions, the low hum of activity returning to the set. The brief moment of alarm had passed. "Let's try it again," Mr. Miller called out. "Kurt, same energy, but pull that foot back just a smidgen. We want the illusion of a kick, not the actual contact." And Elvis tried to react just a hair quicker to the collision. Kurt felt a renewed sense of determination. He would get this right. He would not kick Elvis Presley again. This time he focused on precision. He'd still run fast, but he'd consciously pull back his foot at the last second, making it look like a near miss or a very light brush. He took his mark again behind the kitchen door. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing a scene, picturing Elvis, picturing his own movement. He took a deep breath, released it slowly. "All right, Kurt," and action. He burst through the door, a whirlwind of energy. His little legs pumped. He fixed his gaze on the far exit, acting as if the most important thing in the world was on the other side of that door. As he approached Elvis, he consciously focused on his foot. He could feel his leg swinging, but he tensed his calf, trying to rein it in just before contact. He felt the faintest brush against Elvis's trousers. Barely there. It was perfect. A feather-light touch enough to indicate contact, but not enough to hurt. "Hey, mister, watch where you're going," he yelled, then dashed off camera. He stopped, turning an anxious look on his face. Had he finally nailed it? Elvis, standing at the counter, rubbed his shin again, a theatrical grimace on his face. He shook his head slowly, then looked at Kurt, a wide grin breaking out. "Nope, he's still got me, Miller. That kid's a natural-born kicker." The crew laughed louder this time. Kurt's jaw dropped. He hadn't actually kicked him that time, had he? He was sure he hadn't. He'd been so careful. Elvis walked towards him. "Just kidding, partner," he said, reaching out and ruffling Kurt's hair. "That was perfect. That was exactly what we needed. Made it look like you meant business without actually leaving a bruise," he winked. "Good job." Kurt felt a wave of relief so profound it made him lightheaded. He hadn't messed up. Elvis had been playing a trick on him, teasing him, and it felt good, like he was part of the joke. "You little rascal," Mr. Miller said, chuckling. "All right, that looked good for camera. We'll get a few more takes just for safety, but I think we've got it. Kurt, great energy. Elvis, great reaction." The rest of the takes went smoothly. Kurt was careful, his movements precise. He still put all his energy into the run, making Rusty believable, but his foot never actually made significant contact with Elvis again. Each time Elvis reacted perfectly. A slight stumble, a surprised look, a low chuckle as Kurt ran off during a short break. Elvis walked over to Kurt again. He pulled out a colorful plastic toy from his pocket. "A small spinning top. Here, kid," he said, handing it to Kurt. "For all that hard kicking, you earned it." Kurt's eyes widened. "Wow. Thank you, Elvis." He's from the top. It was a simple toy, but from Elvis, it felt like a treasure. "Anytime, partner," Elvis said, his smile genuine. He ruffled Kurt's hair again. "Just try not to kick anyone else today." "All right. My shins are taking a beating." Kurt giggled. "Hegenchen. Die Kudding." Toy from Elvis Presley. He was starting to understand the ebb and flow of a movie set, the bursts of intense activity followed by periods of waiting, the endless repetition of scenes until they were perfect. He also understood the difference between a rehearsal and a take, the moment when the cameras were actually rolling, capturing the scene for real. For this specific scene, they had rehearsed it several times now, and each time Kurt had tried his best to nail the accidental bump without actually making a solid impact. Elvis had been encouraging, always quick with a joke or a word of praise. That playful teasing about Kurt's strong kick had actually helped relax Kurt, turning his embarrassment into a shared joke. "Now," Mr. Miller called out, "all right, everyone, this is a take, rolling camera." A sudden hush fell over the set. The only sounds were the whirring of the camera and the quiet breaths of the crew. This was it, the moment of truth. Kurt felt the familiar butterflies flutter in his stomach, but this time they were mixed with excitement rather than just pure dread. He was ready. He stood behind the swinging kitchen door, waiting for his cue. He imagined Rusty, a boy, on a mission, late for something, running. He put all that energy into his little body, building up the momentum. Action. Mr. Miller's voice sliced through the silence. Kurt burst through the door, his small frame propelled forward with surprising force. He moved quickly, his eyes fixed on the imaginary destination across the diner. As he approached Elvis, who was casually leaning against the counter, sipping a prop cup, Kurt focused on the familiar path, the precise angle he needed to take. He focused on controlling his leg, making sure it was a near miss, a brush, a pretend kick, but in his eagerness to make the scene look as real and energetic as possible, and perhaps due to a tiny misstep on the slick studio floor, his foot swung out just a fraction more than intended. He felt a distinct thump as his sneaker connected with Elvis's shin. It wasn't hard enough to send Elvis stumbling, but it was definitely more than a light graze. It was a solid, undeniable connection. Kurt's eyes flickered to Elvis's face as he sped past. For a split second, he saw Elvis flinch, a quick, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes, a slight clench of his jaw. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the surprised reaction his character was supposed to convey. "Hey, mister, watch where you're going," Kurt yelled. "Exactly." On cue, his voice filled with the defiant energy of his character. Even as his heart plummeted, he dashed out. The exit, his mind racing. He'd done it again. He'd actually kicked him, and this time it was on camera. He stopped just beyond the frame, out of sight of the camera, and turned back. His breath held. He watched Elvis on the monitor, still acting, still performing his reaction. Elvis finished his line. A low grumble about "these kids nowadays," then straightened up, rubbing his shin with his hand. "And cut," Mr. Miller's voice boomed. Kurt felt a chill run down his spine. The air on the set still felt charged, but now it was with a new tension. He looked at Elvis. Elvis was still rubbing his shin, a thoughtful expression on his face. He didn't look angry, but he certainly didn't look like he was joking this time. Crew members who had been close to the action exchanged glances. Kurt felt a familiar hot flush creep up his neck. He was mortified he'd ruined the take. He'd hurt the king. "Elvis," he offed quickly towards Elvis. Elvis slowly lifted his head, his blue eyes scanning the set, then, resting on Kurt, who was peeking around the corner of the set piece, Elvis's gaze was steady, not angry, but serious. He sighed softly, then slowly shook his head. "Well, Miller," Elvis said, his voice surprisingly calm, though a little lower than usual. "I think that little fella's got a future in Kung Fu." Took a deep breath, and then a slow smile started to spread across his face, the kind that reached his eyes and crinkled them at the corners. Because that, my friend, was a certified kick. A wave of relief washed over Kurt, so powerful that his knees felt weak. Elvis wasn't angry. He was still joking. "Even after a real kick? Are you serious, Elvis? Did he hurt you?" Mr. Miller asked, still looking concerned. Elvis chuckled, a soft, warm sound that made Kurt feel a little more at ease. "Nah, Miller, I'm tougher than I look. Just a little surprised, that's all. Kid's got some powerful legs on him." He looked directly at Kurt, who was now stepping out from his hiding spot, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Come on over here, partner," Elvis said, beckoning him forward with a gentle motion of his hand. Kurt hesitated for a second, then slowly walked towards Elvis, feeling every eye on him. He knew he needed to apologize. Truly apologize this time, not just for rehearsal, but for a real mistake. He felt a lump form in his throat. Elvis knelt down again, a slight wince as he bent his leg, but he quickly covered it with a smile. "All right, champ," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "Tell me what was going through your head. There, you trying to take down the king?" He teased, but his eyes were filled with nothing but kindness. Kurt swallowed hard. "No, Elvis, I swear, I was trying so hard not to. I don't know, my foot went out. I'm really, really sorry. Did I hurt you?" His voice was small, filled with genuine remorse. Elvis reached out and gently ruffled Kurt's hair again. "You didn't hurt me, Kurt. Not really, just surprised me a little. You got good speed, good energy. That's what we want for the movie." He paused, his smile softening. "But maybe next time for real, we just make sure it's a near miss. All right. Don't want to explain a limp to the folks back home." Kurt felt tears welling in his eyes, but they were tears of relief, not fear. Elvis was amazing. He wasn't just class. He was pure gold. The air on the set, which had frozen in a moment of collective anxiety, slowly began to thaw as Elvis's calm, almost amused words filled the space. Everyone had seen the genuine flinch, the slight wince, and the immediate concern had been palpable. Now, as Elvis reassured them, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the crew. Kurt, standing directly in front of Elvis, could barely believe what he was hearing. He'd braced himself for anger, for disappointment, for anything but this gentle, understanding response. Elvis was still kneeling, his famous blue eyes sparkling with a mix of warmth and humor. "Honestly, Kurt, it's all right," Elvis reiterated, seeing the boy's lingering distress. He placed a gentle hand on Kurt's shoulder, a light squeeze. "You were just doing your job sometimes when you're acting, especially in a physical scene. These things happen. It's an accident, no harm done." Kurt looked into those kind eyes, and something inside him clicked. He realized Elvis wasn't just being polite. He genuinely meant it. There was no trace of irritation, no hidden frustration. He was completely at ease with the situation, even with a 10-year-old having just kicked him on national television. Well, almost. But I saw you flinch," Kurt mumbled, still feeling a knot of guilt in his stomach. "Did it really not hurt?" Elvis chuckled softly. "Well, I'm not going to lie. It got my attention," he admitted, a twinkle in his eye. "You pack a little punch there, champ. But I'm a tough old bird. I've taken worse from my own daddy when I was your age, trying to sneak into the cookie jar." He winked conspiratorially, making Kurt giggle to spite himself. "See?" Elvis said, straightening up with a slight grunt, still smiling. "Nothing a little ice pack won't fix later. What matters is you were committed to the scene. You ran like Rusty was supposed to run. That's the main thing. We can always adjust the contact." "Mr. Miller," the director walked over, a look of respect on his face. "Elvis, that's incredibly gracious of you. Are you sure you don't want to take a break? Get some ice?" "Nah, Miller, I'm good," Elvis replied easily. "Just shows we're getting it right. That kid makes it feel real. That's a good thing for a movie, isn't it? He clapped Mr. Miller on the shoulder. Kurt was still trying to process it all. Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world, was completely unfazed by being kicked by a child actor. He was treating it like a funny anecdote, a minor occupational hazard. He was being, well, pure class. Elvis then turned back to Kurt, his smile softening even more. You know, when I was a kid trying to learn guitar, I used to hit my fingers all the time. Sometimes you gotta get a little bump or bruise to learn how to do things just right. It's part of the process. Paused and added, You got good instincts, Kurt. Just need to fine-tune them a little. Kurt felt a warmth spread through him. It wasn't just forgiveness, it was encouragement. Elvis wasn't just brushing it off. He was turning it into a teaching moment, making Kurt feel like a student, not just a clumsy kid. So, Elvis continued, changing the subject slightly, You like making movies so far? Kurt nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, it's really cool, but also a little scary sometimes. That's how it should be, Elvis said with a knowing nod. A little bit scary, a little bit exciting. That means you care. Just remember, it's all about telling a story. And you, Rusty, you've got an important part in this story. He then gently took Kurt's hand and led him over to the counter, where the prop master was discreetly wiping down some glasses. Hey, Frank, Elvis called out. You got any more of those little toy tops you were showing me yesterday? My partner here, he deserves a reward for all his hard work and for being a good sport. The prop master Frank smiled knowingly. Sure thing, Elvis, right here. He rummaged in a box and pulled out a slightly larger, more intricate wooden spinning top, beautifully painted. Whoa, Kurt breathed, his eyes wide. There you go, champ, Elvis said, handing it to him. Something to remember your first big Hollywood kick by. Keep it as a good luck charm. Kurt clutched the top, feeling an immense sense of gratitude. He looked up at Elvis, unable to find the words to express how he felt. Now, Elvis said, clapping his hands together softly, Miller, you want one more for safety. I think this kid's got the controlled aggression down pat now, Mr. Miller laughed. I think we do too, Elvis, but sure, let's get one more. Just to be absolutely certain, same energy, Kurt. Just that careful pullback. As Kurt went back to his mark, he felt a lightness he hadn't expected. The fear was gone, the embarrassment had faded. In its place was a deep admiration for Elvis Presley. Not just the star, but the person. He had shown Kurt what true grace looked like, what it meant to be a professional, and how to be kind, even when things didn't go perfectly. He was a king, all right, but he was also just a really good man. The final take of the scene went off without a hitch. Kurt, fueled by Elvis's kindness, was perfectly precise. His run was still full of mischievous energy, but his foot barely grazed Elvis's trousers, just enough to give the illusion of contact. Elvis reacted flawlessly. A surprised stumble, a quick glance at the departing boy, a wry smile. Mr. Miller called cut with a satisfied grin. Excellent. That's a wrap on this scene. Great work, everyone. The crew applauded, and Kurt felt a surge of pride. He had done it. He had gotten the scene right, and he hadn't kicked Elvis, not seriously anyway, on the final take. As the crew began to dismantle parts of the set for the next scene, Elvis walked over to Kurt, a water bottle in his hand. He knelt down again, looking at Kurt with that familiar, warm gaze. You really got it that last time, partner, Elvis said, his voice soft. Perfect timing. That's how it's done. Kurt looked up at him, a serious expression on his young face. Elvis, he began, his voice earnest, I really, truly am sorry about that first time. I didn't mean to kick you so hard. He still felt a pang of guilt thinking about the distinct thump his foot had made. Elvis reached out and gently squeezed Kurt's shoulder. Hey, I told you it's all right. Accidents happen, especially when you're putting your all into it, which you were. That's a good thing, Kurt. That means you're committed. It means you're really in the scene. He paused. It's better to go for it and make a mistake than to hold back and make the scene look fake, you understand? Kurt nodded slowly. I do. My dad says the same thing about acting, about really believing it. Exactly, Elvis said, his smile broadening. Your dad's a smart man. He stood up slowly, stretching his legs. We're always learning in this business, no matter how long you've been doing it, even me. Kurt was surprised by that. Elvis, still learning, he seemed so perfect, so effortless. For real? Kurt asked, his eyes wide. Elvis nodded. For real? Every movie, every song, every time I step on stage. There's always something new to learn, something to get better at, and sometimes you learn from the unexpected places, like from a quick-footed young fella who reminds. Kurt felt a warmth spread through him. Elvis wasn't just letting him off the hook, he was making him feel valued, like his accidental kick had actually contributed something positive. However small, it was an incredible way to turn a potentially awkward or negative situation into a moment of connection and learning. Elvis then glanced at Kurt's dad, being Russell, who was watching from a few feet away, a proud but slightly amused look on his face. Bing gave Elvis a nod of thanks, a silent acknowledgement of his kindness. So, Kurt, Elvis continued, leaning down slightly again, what do you think you want to do next in the movie business? You think you'll stick with it? Kurt thought for a moment. Before this, movie acting had just seemed like a fun thing to try. Now, seeing how a master like Elvis handled himself, he feigned a blend of professionalism and genuine warmth. It felt different. It felt like something he could really devote himself to. I think so, Kurt said, a new determination in his voice. I really like it. It's like telling stories with your whole body, Elvis grinned. That's a great way to put it. It really is. And you got a good start. You listen, you've got energy, and you're not afraid to make a little contact. He ruffled Kurt's hair one last time. Just remember what we talked about. Always be ready to learn, and always treat people with respect. No matter who they are, from the director to the guy sweeping the floor, everyone's important. Kurt nodded, taking Elvis's words to heart. It wasn't just acting advice, it was life advice. He had come to the set starstruck by a music legend, and he was leaving not just with an incredible story and a cool wooden top, but with a profound lesson in humility, kindness, and grace. He looked at Elvis, really looked at him. Beyond the famous face, the iconic hair, the legendary voice, he saw a man who was generous with his spirit, patient with a child's mistake, and genuinely interested in lifting others up. It wasn't just a performance of kindness, it was who he was. Thank you, Elvis, Kurt said, his voice sincere, for everything. Elvis just smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Kurt feel like he was talking to an old friend. Anytime, partner. You did good today. Now go on, enjoy your break. And try not to kick any more kings today. All right. My shins need a rest. Kurt laughed, a brighted, unburdened sound. The weight of his earlier mistake had completely lifted. He felt light, happy, and incredibly lucky. He knew this day and this unexpected interaction would stay with him for a very long time. It was a masterclass, not just in acting, but in being a truly good person. The incident of the great Elvis kick became a running joke on set, always delivered with a wink and a smile. Far from being a source of embarrassment, it had inadvertently paved the way for a unique bond between the 10-year-old actor and the king of rock and roll. After the scene was wrapped, Kurt found himself gravitating towards Elvis during breaks. He wasn't the only one. Crew members often clustered around Elvis, eager to hear a story or just soak in his matted presence, but Elvis always seemed to make time for Kurt. One afternoon, while the crew was setting up a complicated camera shot, Elvis spotted Kurt sitting alone near a prop car, meticulously spinning the wooden top he'd been given. "Hey, champ," Elvis called out, walking over with a leisurely pace, a half-eaten banana in his hand. Still got that magic top spinning? Kurt looked up, his face lighting up. Yeah. It spins really good. It's probably my favorite toy, Elvis chuckled, taking a seat beside him on the running board of the prop car. Glad to hear it. Every kid needs a good toy. He peeled the rest of his banana. So you know about that kick. Kurt's heart did a quick flutter, but then he saw the familiar mischievous glint in Elvis's eyes. I was thinking, Elvis continued, his voice mock serious. You're pretty quick with those feet. You ever think about dancing, or maybe learning some moves for your acting? Kurt shrugged. I just play sports sometimes. Baseball, mostly. Well, that explains the power in those legs then, Elvis said with a grin. Sometimes, you know, when you're on stage or in a movie, you gotta move in a different way. You gotta make it look graceful even if you're pretending to be clumsy. He stood up, putting his banana peel carefully in a nearby trash can. Come on, let me show you something. Kurt scrambled off the car, eager. Elvis started with a simple two-step, swaying his hips slightly, a fluid, almost liquid movement. See, it's all in the hips and the knees. You gotta let your body flow with the music even if there ain't no music playing. He demonstrated a small dip, then a smooth turn. It's about balance, about control, but also about letting go. Kurt tried to imitate him, feeling awkward and stiff. He swayed his hips, but it looked more like he was trying to shake something off his shoe. Elvis laughed kindly. Nah, not like that, Elvis said gently, taking Kurt's shoulders and guiding him. Think of it, like you're walking, but with more rhythm. Like the floor is a little bouncy. He put on some imaginary music, humming a slow, bluesy tune, and moved his feet, barely lifting them. A subtle shuffle Kurt tried again, mimicking Elvis's subtle movement. Walking softly but with purpose. And if you got purpose, you got power. He then showed Kurt a quick, easy spin, a signature move, emphasizing how to use his core. Keep your head up, look at the audience or the camera. Don't look down at your feet. Let them do their job. For the next half hour, during every spare moment, Elvis would share little tricks with Kurt. How to glide across a floor, how to throw a punch that looked real but didn't connect, how to fall without hurting yourself. He talked about stage presence, about connecting with the audience, about finding the rhythm in every scene. It was a private masterclass tailor-made for a curious 10-year-old. Kurt absorbed it all like a sponge. He saw a side of Elvis that few people probably got to see, the patient teacher, the thoughtful mentor, the kind soul who genuinely wanted to share his craft. Elvis didn't talk down to him. He spoke to him as if he were a fellow artist, sharing secrets of the trade. Sometimes Elvis would even sit down and strum his guitar, not the prop one, but his personal one that he kept in his trailer. He'd play a few chords, a snippet of a blues song, or an old gospel tune. Just for Kurt, the music was raw, soulful, and incredibly beautiful. It wasn't the loud, flashy rock and roll that made him famous. It was something deeper, more intimate. You know, Kurt, Elvis said one day, strumming a gentle chord. Music, acting, it's all about feeling. If you don't feel it here, he tacked his chest, then folks won't feel it out there. He gestured outwards. You gotta put your heart into it. That's what makes it real. Kurt watched him completely captivated. He realized that the kick, which had seemed like such a disaster, had been the key to unlocking this incredible experience. It had broken down the barrier between a global superstar and a nervous child. It had shown Kurt that behind the legend was a man of immense character, a man willing to extend genuine kindness and mentorship without expectation. He started looking forward to going to set every day, not just to act, but to learn from Elvis. Their conversations ranged from acting techniques to fishing, from school to how to hit a baseball. Elvis was curious about Kurt's life, too, asking about his family, his friends, his dreams. Kurt felt a true friendship blossoming something he never would have imagined possible. King wasn't just a celebrity. He was becoming a friend, a mentor, and an unexpected source of profound life lessons. As the days turned into weeks on the set of It Happened at the World's Fair, Kurt Russell's understanding of Elvis Presley deepened. He saw the behind-the-scenes magic, not just of filmmaking, but of the man himself. Elvis wasn't just comedic on camera, he was that way all the time, spreading warmth and kindness wherever he went. Kurt noticed how Elvis treated everyone on set, from the biggest executives to the lowest-ranking production assistant. He knew their names, asked about their families, and listened intently to their answers. He'd offer a word of encouragement to a tired grip, share a laugh with the catering crew, or offer an impromptu autograph to a gaffer's child visiting the set. He was genuine, approachable, and always seemed to have an endless supply of patience. One particularly long day, when everyone was getting a little antsy, Elvis noticed a young sound technician struggling with a piece of equipment. Instead of just walking past, Elvis paused. "Everything all right there, son?" he asked, his voice gentle. Technician, clearly flustered, mumbled about a stubborn cable. Elvis, without a moment's hesitation, knelt down and offered to help, holding a light steady, while the technician finally untangled the wire. "There you go," Elvis said, patting the young man on the back. "Sometimes you just need an extra pair of hands, huh?" The technician looked incredibly grateful. Kurt watched this small interaction, and it cemented something in his mind. Elvis's kindness wasn't just for show. It was innate. During lunch breaks, Elvis rarely ate alone in his trailer. More often than not, he'd sit at one of the long tables with the crew, cracking jokes, telling stories from his touring days, or asking about their lives. He seemed to genuinely enjoy the camaraderie, the feeling of being part of a team. Kurt, always nearby, would often be invited to join them. Elvis had a way of making everyone feel important. He'd remember little details about Kurt, like his love for baseball. One day he brought in an old worn baseball glove and ball. "Heard you were a natural slugger," Elvis said, tossing the ball gently to Kurt. "Ever try pitching?" Before Kurt could answer, Elvis led him to a relatively clear corner of the soundstage. "All right, show me what you got," he challenged playfully. For the next 15 minutes, Elvis, the king of rock and roll, threw a baseball back and forth with a 10-year-old Kurt Russell, offering tips on grip and throwing mechanics. He crouched down to catch Kurt's pitches, cheering him on when he threw a good one. It was a surreal, heartwarming scene that few outside the set would ever witness. He also noticed Elvis's deep respect for his craft. Even though he was a music superstar, Elvis took his acting roles seriously. He would study his lines, discuss motivations with Mr. Miller, and always be prepared. He wasn't just showing up. He was putting in the work. Kurt saw Elvis practicing a specific expression in front of a mirror, or going over a line again and again, trying to find the perfect delivery. One afternoon, Kurt was watching Elvis rehearse a dramatic scene that didn't involve him. Elvis had to deliver a powerful monologue full of emotion. He nailed it on the first few takes. But then he asked Mr. Miller if he could try it again. "I just feel like I can get a little more longing in that line, Miller," Elvis explained, his brow furrowed in concentration, like he's really reaching for something he can't quite grasp. He delivered the line again, and this time the emotion was raw, palpable. Kurt felt a shiver run down his spine. It was a masterclass in acting, seeing Elvis dig deeper, pushing for perfection even when he already seemed perfect. After the scene was done, Elvis walked over to Kurt. "See, Kurt," he said, gesturing to the set, "it's not just about the lines. It's about what's behind the lines, what your character is feeling, what he wants. That's what makes people believe you." He then showed Kurt a simple exercise. Think of something you really, really want right now, like maybe a new bicycle or a huge chocolate cake. Kurt grinned. "Chocolate cake? "Okay now," Elvis said, his eyes twinkling. "Say this line. I really need that cake, but don't just say it. Think about how much you want it. Feel it in your belly, in your heart, like you haven't eaten in days." Kurt tried it, and the difference was immediate. His voice had more yearning, his eyes were wider, his whole body seemed to lean into the desire. "That's it!" Elvis exclaimed, snapping his fingers. "See, that's what it means to act. It's not just pretending, it's feeling." Kurt felt a profound appreciation for Elvis. He was learning so much more than just how to hit his marks or say his lines. He was learning about dedication, empathy, and the true meaning of performance. He was witnessing firsthand the true heart of a legend, a heart that beat not just with rhythm and fame, but with genuine kindness and a deep understanding of the human spirit. The king wasn't just a performer. He was a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. The final days of shooting, it happened at the World's Fair, for Kurt felt bittersweet. He was excited to see the movie completed, but he knew he would miss the bustling energy of the set, the camaraderie with the crew, and most of all, the invaluable time spent with Elvis. On Kurt's very last day of filming, his scenes were finished by mid-afternoon. He changed out of his costume, feeling a pang of nostalgia already. His dad Bing came to collect him. "All right, Kurt, that's a wrap for you," Bing said, ruffling his son's hair. "I'm proud of you," Kurt beamed. "Thanks, Dad." He looked around for Elvis, hoping to say a proper goodbye. He spotted him across the set, talking with Mr. Miller about a scene they were shooting later that week. "Go on, say your goodbyes," Bing encouraged. Sensing Kurt's desire, Kurt walked over his stomach, doing a little flutter. Elvis is perfectly, waiting for a break in their conversation. Elvis turned, his face lighting up when he saw Kurt. "Hey there, champ. All done for the day?" Kurt nodded. "Yeah, this is my last day." He felt a lump form in his throat. He knelt down, putting his hand gently on Kurt's shoulder. "Well, I'll be last day already. Seems like just yesterday you were kicking me on my shin." He chuckled, but there was a genuine warmth in his eyes. "Thank you, Elvis," Kurt said, looking directly into his eyes. "For everything, for being so nice when and for teaching me stuff about acting and about everything." Elvis smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Kurt, it was my pleasure. You're a smart kid, and you've got a lot of talent, and you listen, which is the most important thing. You're going to go far." He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden figure of a little cowboy. It was beautiful, a miniature work of art. "Here," Elvis said, pressing it into Kurt's hand. "Something to remember me by. And remember what I told you. Always be yourself, always be kind, and always put your heart into whatever you do." Kurt clutched the cowboy figure, feeling overwhelmed. It was another tangible reminder of Elvis's generosity, a physical representation of the lessons he'd learned. "Thank you, Elvis," he whispered, feeling a tear prickle at the corner of his eye. Elvis ruffled his hair one last time. "Now don't you go getting all mushy on me. Partner, we'll be seeing each other again. This ain't goodbye, it's see you around." He winked. "Maybe next time I'll teach you how to sing a little too, but keep those feet away from my shins, all right?" Kurt laughed, the lump in his throat easing. "I will." He gave Elvis a quick, heartfelt hug, something he never would have dared to do. Just a few weeks ago, Elvis hugged him back, a warm, reassuring embrace. As Kurt walked off the set with his dad, he looked back. Elvis was already back to talking with Mr. Miller, his attention focused on the next scene. But for a brief moment, he looked up and waved a small, private gesture, just for Kurt. Kurt waved back, a wide smile on his face. The drive home was filled with a quiet contentment. Kurt clutched the wooden cowboy and the spinning top in his lap. He thought about his first day on set, the nervous excitement, the accidental kick, and the surprising, heartwarming reaction from Elvis. He had come expecting to meet a larger-than-life legend, but he had also met a man who was humble, kind, patient, and incredibly generous. With his spirit, he realized that the kick hadn't been a disaster at all. It had been a turning point, an unexpected catalyst that had opened the door to a unique mentorship and a genuine connection. Elvis hadn't just brushed off a child's mistake. He had embraced it, turned it into a learning opportunity, and used it to foster a bond. He had shown Kurt what pure class truly meant. Not just fame or talent, but integrity, respect, and a profound capacity for human kindness. Years later, as Kurt Russell grew into his own successful acting career, he would often recount the story of kicking Elvis Presley. It was a story he told with fondness, with respect, and with a deep sense of gratitude. It wasn't just a funny anecdote, it was a foundational memory. It was the moment a young boy learned about professionalism, humility, and the extraordinary power of kindness, all from the king himself. And he carried those lessons and the memory of Elvis's pure class with him for the rest of his life.